The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.
Hi, I'm Gali Bloch-Liran and welcome to The Human Founder, the podcast where we speak about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurs often describe the emotional roller coaster that is embedded in being an entrepreneur or investor or an executive, where you experience the lowest of lows when you lost people and trust on October 7th. Now you hope you can rebuild what is broken. And the highest of highs when every year you get a hit of high when Lemonade announces its giveback proceeds. You hear about all the charity you managed to support and it makes you feel like it all was worth it. And it's from that place of uncertainty, the need to constantly self-manage ourselves, keep up our energy and be mentally resilient in order to deal with everything. Well, it's not easy, right? In each episode, I will be talking to entrepreneurs, investors, executives, psychologists, being their sounding board, with the goal of creating a space for this less spoken about layer, which is the mental aspect accompanying the entrepreneurial journey. I will also share tips and tricks to help boost your focus, clarity, and mental resilience. And today I have the real pleasure to speaking with Adina Eckstein. Hey, Adina, and it's really, really great to have you here with me.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Adina, you are the COO of Lemonade since 2021, having joined the company in 2019. Before Lemonade, you spent 8 years in London as the COO of digital channels at HSBC, where you spreaded the team responsible for developing the global mobile banking app. At BBC Worldwide, you served as VP of Program and Portfolio, overseeing consumer digital technology development and operations. During your Tel Aviv startup days, you co-founded Vinci, right? And played pivotal roles through its acquisition, including VP Product Delivery and VP Sales. Passionate about the intersection of people and technology, you reside in Even Yehuda with your 3 dragons, finding solace either on stage singing or swimming in the peaceful sea. That's another thing that is very, very similar to us. Before we dive into today's episode, make sure to follow the Human Founder podcast in the app you're listening at. And I'll be happy if you click on review, follow, or subscribe, depending on the platform you're at, and rate the podcast. This way, you'll keep the finger on the pulse and be updated right away with all the new episodes straight to your feed. And it will also make me happy. So, did you press follow? Let's dive in. So, Adina, it took us some time to make this coffee on record, right? Happen, and I'm very happy, and we just had a chit chat and like the prep, and it was so much fun. So we're just going to continue this. So what it feels like to be the COO of Lemonade? Let's start with that.
Wow, that's a big question to start with.
I'll interrupt you in a second. Don't worry.
Okay, what does it feel like? It feels great. I think I have the best job in the world.
Why?
I think Lemonade is the most interesting company in the world to work in. It's really prime for having a COO, as in if I have to think about the intersection between the organization, its phase in its development, what it's trying to achieve during these years, and what a COO is destined to do, it's a very good match. I joined the company when we were just a few hundred, and now we're over 1,000 employees. We had one product at the time, and now we've got multiple products in the market in multiple geographies in the US and throughout Europe. And my job is to scale the organization, and that's the COO's job, to scale an organization. So it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
So I want us to dive deeper into what a COO actually means or how it looks like, because the fact is that each organization, it looks a little bit different according to the values of their organizations and the growth and the scale and the people that actually run the organization. But let's go a little bit back to the beginning, and then later on we'll go back to who you are in your life journey, because I can see how it all connects. So you actually began at Lemonade as the chief of staff. What's the difference between chief of staff and COO, and how you paved your way from being chief of staff to being a COO?
I think they're 2 completely different roles, even though some of the skills and competencies of individuals filling these roles could be the same. They could be transferable. As chief of staff, you revolve around somebody. You're serving this person. You're amplifying what this person delivers. So at the time joining Lemonade, I was chief of staff to Shai Wininger, who was the COO at the time of Lemonade and co-founder. And my job was to make sure that Shai could extend his impact on the organization by extending his reach. So that's one job. As CEO, and I can talk about it for years. As COO of Lemonade, I'm not revolving around any particular individual. I'm thinking about our stakeholders, namely our shareholders, our customers, and our employees. I'm thinking about the objectives that we have for all of these different types of stakeholders. I'm thinking about what the business is trying to achieve, and I'm doing whatever it takes to achieve that in organization, in technology, in processes. So I think they're definitely different roles. But some of the characteristics, as I mentioned, that are needed are very similar. You need to be a multitasker. You need to be multidisciplinary. You need to be able to read people very well. You need to be able to understand motivations. In both of these roles, you need to get dozens, thousands of people swimming in the same direction on their own desire. So that requires really reading what they're interested in and thinking about how what they're interested in can align with what the business needs. You need to be willing to roll up your sleeves and be very tactical, but you also need to be able to resurface and think strategically. You need to be able to distinguish when to do either of those. You need to be a leader. You need to be somebody worth following. So I would say that you can transition from both of these roles, but it's a very, very different role.
So how was it in the beginning to work with a founder like Shai, and nowadays to be a CEO in a company with both co-CEOs is Shai and Daniel Schreiber? How does it feel like to work alongside them and to actually execute and lead their vision and their day-to-day, thoughts about how their organization is supposed to develop?
I think actually you worded that very well. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Shai and Daniel have a vision. They want to do this. They want to fivefold that. Sometimes the mission is, extremely forward-looking. We want to be the most loved insurance company in the world. Or we want to be there for all of our customers' needs. We want to be there for their time and needs. We want to be an insurance company that's going to be there for our customers when others have let them down, when they're least expecting us to. That's very forward thinking. But then also the objectives and goals could be, we want our top line to be such and such next year. We want to hold cost this way. We want to become more efficient by X%. Then we have to think about all the different parts of the organization and how they're going to deliver in order to achieve those objectives. Just to correct you slightly, now Daniel is the COO of Lemonade and Shai is the president and co-founder of Lemonade, although the roles are still very similar. The relationship is still very similar.
I need to update in the book because it changes every sometime.
We are a public company, so I'm just making sure to make sure everything is by the book.
Thanks for the correction.
But they are very complementary in how they see things and in their skills. Daniel's very business driven, and Shai's obviously much more focused on the product and the user experience, and also the way they think about organizational design is interesting and complementary, and that's also a relationship that I get to navigate, that I have the privilege to navigate. But it starts from organizational design. So I'll maybe answer your question through an example. When I joined Lemonade, as I mentioned, we were just a single product line. We had just launched. We had, a few 100,000 customers. But now we want to be multi-line. We want to be multi-geography. We want to have, different types of areas of focus. But we were organized. We had, product, engineering, CX, claims, etc. And then you started to have these bottlenecks where it was very difficult to prioritize and determine, whether to do this or that. And we started pivoting, too many pivots at any given point in time. So one of the first things that we had to think about is, what is the organizational design that's going to service us being a multi-line company? And that's when we established what we call the company model, where we have multiple business lines. Each business line will have a GM. They're autonomous. They have their own budgets. They have almost like a P&L, and they get to operate their business. They get their goals from the founders, from leadership, based on our financial goals, based on our business goals. And they have to execute. They have to execute, and they have to think through what initiatives they need to put in place. But they have the resources in place in order to do that in an autonomous way. And that's just one example of, okay, that's what you want to achieve. You want to become multi-line. Okay, so first of all, we're not set up to do that as an organization, et cetera, et cetera.
So as a COO, you touch so many things, so many points, so many both industries, verticals, things within the organization. What do you see as like the most important thing that you need to develop, that you need to focus on, because you have so many balls, you know, in the air in the same moment. You juggle so many things. How do you prioritize your own vision, your own things that you need to execute? What helps you there?
It really depends on the task at hand, and also on the resources that I have to solve the task at hand. At Lemonade, any company will have a different definition for what COO is. At Lemonade, it's quite broad. I'm responsible for all the what we call frontline teams, the customer support. I'm responsible for the claims organization. These are the volume teams. I'm responsible for people, HR, talent, office operations, talent acquisition. I'm responsible for business operations, which is, you know, goal setting, execution, delivery, planning. So it is very, very broad. At any given point in time, I'll have a leader in each of these areas, and they'll have varying levels of competency and experience, and they're new in their job or not so new in their job. And therefore, that will sort of help me think through when I kind of need to deep dive into areas. And that drives my areas of focus. You know, many times you decide to set course on a certain initiative, and you know, you put everything in place, you've got the technology in place, you've got the teams in place, they start sailing, but then you look at your dashboards and some of your stabilizer metrics are falling low. So for example, a stabilizer metric could be, I don't know, you want to increase rates, but not to the extent that it's going to hurt your retention. That would be a stabilizer metric. Okay, so what do you do there? Then you kind of have to shift your weight to the areas that are not resourced, that are not being thought through. So I can't say that I'm extremely methodological about where I decide to spend my time, but I use data a lot to determine where there are red areas and where I need to put some emphasis.
Because I can imagine that it's like you have so many things going on, and your decision on what to focus is crucial to the rest of the organization, because you need to prioritize best in order for the other leaders that you work with to prioritize in the best way. So beyond like the data and the dashboard and just to look at the numbers and to see, you know, the heat map or whatever, where do you need to focus? What else helps you there?
Well, I suppose the humans. This is definitely, I mean, I really agree with the concept of this podcast and the work that you're doing. Sometimes a problem can be so huge, or an opportunity can be so huge, but you know, and you're familiar with the humans involved, so that actually taking a step back and letting them shine and letting them be autonomous and letting them think through how they prefer to solve it is a much, much better approach. So it's definitely a combination of the data itself, which we have that at abundance, but also who am I working with? How are people working with each other? Is that process working well? Are they speaking? Are they speaking frequently? How much are they speaking? When they speak, do they speak in a professional, objective way? So I think that once you have like these healthy dynamics and healthy teams, healthy cross-functional teams, dealing with challenges, opportunities, risks, you kind of tend to step in where you don't have some of those things.
I totally agree with you. And at the end, with the technology and with the data and with everything, at the end, we're working with people. And it's so crucial to see them, to really see them, to understand their motivations, and like how do you actually help them to do their job in a much better, scalable, and productive way. There's a big difference between being a COO for a small startup, early stage startup, and for a public company, okay? And all the range, of course. So take us a little bit to, although when you joined Lemonade, they weren't such small startup, they already were bigger, but the different roles or capacities that you see for a COO in an early stage startup versus a public company. And also from what I see, there are many different kinds of, but We have sometimes the CEO who is the foreign minister, right? He goes to the investors, etc., etc., and the COO that runs the company internally. But also we can see CEOs that says, no, I want to manage the company internally. I don't want anyone else to do it for me. And then sometimes there's this tension. No, there's no right or wrong. There's founders and CEOs that this path is good for them, and others that needs it in a different way. So from your perspective and experience, how do you see the differences of COO in early stage versus more advanced companies?
I think COOs in early stage, to be honest, I think that we call it a COO. Sometimes the COO is a title that one of the founders is given because the other one is a CEO or a CTO, and then the COO is, run the company, do the thing. What is the thing that the company needs to do? They need to grow. They need to develop a product market fit. They need to get money. They need to hire employees. They need to incorporate themselves. They need to get business. They need to set up a support function, run the business. And I think that that's what a COO does at the beginning. It's kind of what needs to get done. And sometimes it's like really tiny things. Even at HSBC, which is a huge company, it's 300,000 employees, but I was the COO of a division that started tiny. We started working behind a ATM machine that belonged to HSBC, just because HSBC, the corporation, said that we have to wear suits if we're going to come into the office, and we were building a digital capability. I wasn't going to be hiring iOS engineers that were going to wear ties. So I had to find a different space, and what we had was behind an ATM machine. And to the extent that was actually being almost like a COO of a small company, because I was trying to secure the funds. I was trying to, get the space, hire the people. What is it that we're achieving? I wanted to get the business because at HSBC, the countries, the different countries, it's a global organization. They're actually customers. They can decide to opt into global technology or not. So that was kind of like that. I think transitioning into larger companies, I think COOs should be developing not what needs to, what's dropped on the floor and kind of pick it up. I think that approach it's falling short of what a COO really should be, because a COO should be thinking forward. What are the things we want to achieve 18, 24, 5 years down the line? What are the types of things that could potentially be a risk to us or stop our process or slow us down or maybe hinder on our competitive advantage, and need to start thinking about what are the types of building blocks I need to put in place in order to avoid these pitfalls and make sure that we thrive.
But it's always this tension between taking care of the broken things or the bottlenecks, right? Versus looking ahead and what can be more impactful and help us in the future. Always to manage this tension.
If there is tension, it should be untangled. Because tactical things, yes, they'll come and go. But if you solve for the strategic things, there'll be less tactical things to untangle. So yes, maybe on a day-to-day basis, there is that tension. But I do think that we should be thinking much, much, much forward ahead. That's also more empowering for our teams. If you're a COO, you may have operations managers, directors, VPs, SVPs, that you need to give them things to chew on. You need to make sure that they have these estates that they own and they control their destiny, these KPIs that they're responsible for. But as COO, you're supposed to be running ahead and people are supposed to be following you. I remember the change 3 years ago or 2 years ago, COVID, and then suddenly everybody's working remote, and then suddenly the stock market kind of crashes, and everybody's thinking about unit economics. It was suddenly growth is like less exciting, unit economics super exciting. And then COOs are, we're running the company. It's our job to do unit economics. So it's not like we can take these growth targets from the CEO and be like a service provider and make sure that the ship runs smoothly. We're actually having to think about automation and cost to serve and how will that work, and what is the LTV to CAC, and how is that going to play itself out? How are we actually going to become a profitable company? If at the beginning I used to say to Daniel, I've got this great idea, if we automate this and that, and he would say, that's lovely, but growth, 2 years later, but do we have more of these? Because so COOs found themselves really in these strategic, driving, proactive positions, and I think they really had to orient themselves. If you ask me, it's actually happening again now with Gen AI, because we're not going to deep dive specifically into AI, but what it does in the sense that AI is this thing that's going to come and it's going to steal your jobs, right? Like speaking extremely superficially, I don't believe in that statement at all. But then suddenly COOs are needing to think about my entire talent composition needs to change. Learning and development becomes my most important task, because these CXs that used to deal with tickets, they're now becoming prompt engineers, and they have a relationship with robots that they couldn't have even envisioned. So now we're thinking about complete transformation of organizational composition. That's our job now. How could we do that if we're just looking at the floor, thinking about things to pick up?
I relate to what you've just said. I think that what's unique in it, first it was COVID, now it's Word, then it's Gen AI. There will be many changes because this is what it means to be a tech company, right? And if you are not strong with the changes, and if you are not ready to these changes, then you won't prevail. But I think that what lies beneath everything that you're saying is to have this mindset and ability to adapt to change and to see what's coming, and not to always resist it, but to understand that this is the new reality, and how you cope your organization in the best possible way, in the fastest way, in the most effective way to deal with this change and to leverage the change to your needs and to your success. And it doesn't matter what will be the external reason. The idea is, as a COO, how you embrace this change and use it to grow your organization in a better way.
100%. And if you do that well, you'll be a role model for that. And if you're a role model for resilience, coping with change, okay, so yesterday was yesterday, but today's today, then you can really lead and set an example and develop that in multitudes of impact across the entire organization. An organization that has a DNA of being able to cope with change will succeed.
So living in a VUCA world, and a volatile and uncertain and complex and ambiguous world, and as a COO, what are the main keys that you have to succeed in it? For example, is it like specific metrics or specific methodologies that you use, or mindset? What are like the 2-3 main things, if you can name it, and then let's explain them a little bit, that helps you to manage the organization in a VUCA world?
So, like specific methodologies, well, we're kind of married to the OKR framework.
I wanted you to say it because I wanted to dive in.
You wanted me to say that?
Yeah, I'm happy that you said it. We didn't. So wait, before you dive in, for those who are listening in are not aware of and not familiar with, explain in 2 sentences, what does it mean, OKR, and how do we build it, and then how you implement it, for example, in Lemonade. Let's dive deep.
OKRs are objectives and key results. There's a big difference between objectives and key results. Objectives are objectives that are long-standing. They're usually business objectives, financial objectives. They could also be objectives related to the internal side of the company, and the things that you kind of want to work towards. They don't have to be very number specific. Key results have to be very, very measurable, very, very number specific, and they relate to those objectives. So, for example,
let's take an objective and a key result.
So an objective could be that I want my loss ratio to improve. I want the profitability of the business to improve. Therefore, in this Q, I'm going to reduce my loss ratio by 2 points in this specific line of business. And the key results that you set forth, and they could be quarterly, they could, the objectives could stay actually the same for a multitude of years. And the key results will get you towards those everlasting objectives until the objectives become obsolete and you can decide on different ones.
Like the small steps that we need to walk through and achieve in order to get to this objective.
The small steps, but in metrics, not in things to do.
Yes.
Underneath the key results, you have initiatives. Some people actually call them key initiatives, where they would be, okay, so in order to achieve this key result of reducing the loss ratio by X% or by improving growth or retention or churn, or they could also not be business result like that. They could be improving non-voluntary departures of employees in the company. You could also decide to put a people-related objective. So it's initiatives you put in place. Okay, we're going to invest in this product release. We're going to do that. And that's the thing that you kind of commit to throughout the year. So that's what objectives and key results is. It's
2 main comments about us. That first of all, it has to be aligned within the whole organization, to be sync and aligned. Otherwise, we're going to different directions. And the second point, which is where many startups fail is that someone needs to own it and to make the organization commit to it and do it, because otherwise it's just fine numbers on Excel or whatever, but no one is executing it. So as a COO, how do you see those things, and what is your ownership about it?
That's true. That's true about so many things. It's like it's one of those products that if not everybody uses it, then it makes zero sense. And I 100% agree with the sort of being aligned across the organization. For us, the OKR is not a nice to have. It's the thing that keeps everything together. I briefly described at the beginning the organizational structure of Lemonade, where we're completely distributed. There are companies, they're autonomous. So how do you actually connect between them? That's why the OKR framework that's the thing that connects us together. We have OKRs that are bottom up. We have OKRs that are top down. Let's think about the top down for a second. So as a business, we want to achieve this top line for the next year. We want to achieve this bottom line, these stabilizer metrics. This one went from NPS, customer experience, or automation rate with Gen AI, et cetera, et cetera. And then the BizOps group, in combination with the finance group, goes and works out, okay, so what do we think the possible contributions of each of our business lines could be to each of these metrics? They get these metrics as suggestions. They say, okay, what would you need in order to achieve this year or this quarter or this month? They look at their resources at hand. Okay, we could do this initiative, we could do that. That's how the kind of bottom up makes its way back to the top down. And obviously at that point, you kind of resolve conflicts and reallocate resources if necessary, or add on resources. But that's the point in which you have a handshake between the sort of leadership and the different GMs running the business lines to say, okay, I'm committing to this key result because I have these resources and I know what I'm going to do. Throughout the year, if one of the initiatives that I bet on isn't achieving its results, then I'll pivot and do a different one, because my commitment to you is to get the result. That's why we don't have progress meetings about how is this project going. It's uninteresting. You
want to see the bottom line, that it happens.
I want to see the bottom line, and I probably won't introduce any KRs into my operations that I can't actually see in real time on Looker.
And not as a traded company already, but as a startup, growing startup, sometimes the objectives changes along the year. So you have this OKR plan, and how do you expect your leaders, like the GM, for example, that now when you change the objective, how they should adapt to it?
I think you should try not to change the objective.
Okay. But it happens in reality sometimes. You need to pivot, or something happens.
I think in any phase, you should try to define an objective that can be true enough in an absolute way that you should, obviously you have to change it, but I think the key results can change. So for example, if you're a tiny startup, maybe the OKR framework is too early for you, but let's say you wanted to introduce the discipline from the outset. The objective could be get customers. Okay.
So it's general
That's
enough.
That's always true.
Yeah.
So why would that change? I think it's better not to change the objective. I think you can change the key results. I think you shouldn't also do that too frequently, but you should change the key results. You should explain why. I also don't think you should change the key results in the middle of a period. It's much better you set a key result, let's say for a quarter, and if you know you're not going to hit it, you don't change it. You don't hit it. And you have explainability. And then you're better at defining the next
And you can
period.
also debrief it later, what happened there.
Yeah, 100%. If you change it, then you lose that. That's a very important data point that you don't want to get lost.
It's like to sell a stock and when it's low. It's like you lost it already. So how do you implement the OKR process in Lemonade? Like technically, what do you do? How do you do it? Teach the people who wants to learn now how to do it in their growing company. What do you do? Like in the end of the year, last quarter, how do you do it?
So we have an annual planning cycle, and then we have a quarterly planning cycle. The annual planning cycle is pretty heavy, and the quarterly planning cycle is quite lightweight. And then obviously, if there are big events that happen throughout the year that trigger some sort of mid period event, that's okay as well. And during the annual planning cycle, we do something quite similar to what I described. We kind of look at, we always remodel. We have a 5-year model, and we remodel it every year. So we remodel the 5-year plan, and then we look at the different levers that we have that are going to impact our key business results the most. And we ask ourselves, okay, so what are the types of objectives that we need to put in place to make sure that we actually deal with these levers? But we also look at the tension between these levers. So some of them are contradictory to one another. You want to grow cost money, but you also want to keep your cost flat. So you have to discuss the different tensions, and you do also sensitivity tests to sort of see if this improves by 1 point, that will achieve that impact. If this gets worse by 1 point, it will achieve that impact. And then you can really order the list of things that you could do in terms of what impact they could do to the business. And then that turns into, this is what the business wants to achieve for the year.
Mm-hmm.
We always distribute the OKRs to the different business leads, and we say, okay, hypotheses. This is what we'd like you to achieve in your business line for this year.
Mm-hmm.
Go work it out.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a lot of people they need to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
They need to talk to the product leads in the organization. They need to talk to the customer ops people. They need to speak to business development. They need to speak to revenue. They need to sort of bring all these things together. They need to speak to the insurance groups to see, okay, what are we going to do with our rate filings, etc. And they need to come back and say, okay, this is what we can contribute. And then the operating team or the biz ops team will go and take a look at, okay, do we have any gaps? Do we have any overlaps? How do we resolve these conflicts? And then that eventually morphs into what we call operational plans,
Mm-hmm.
which then cement the OKRs. We publish them, we celebrate them, we talk about them in town hall. We also talk about our quarterly OKRs in town hall as well, and we glorify our fuck-ups. Like I say, if we make a mistake or we don't meet an OKR,
Mm-hmm.
that's a very important thing to discuss very publicly as well.
It's a main learning that you need to do.
We didn't do this because of that, and this is
Mhm.
what we're going to improve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the OKRs, I started by asking you, okay, what are the 2-3 main tools that you use as a COO to implement the strategy and everything? And we started to speak about the OKRs, which is a tool that Andy Grove set sometime in the 70s at Intel, if I'm not mistaken, and later on it was implemented in Google, etc., etc. And you show how you do the annual plan and the quarterly plan, and it has to be I really liked how you described it, that the top down meets the bottom up. But I wanted to take you back to what you spoke about people and the behaviors behind it, the people behind it. Because at the end, when you see that, for example, one of your leaders or the GM, he or she does not meet the goal or is not in the right direction, and you can already see it. How do you as a COO actually engage with them in the best possible way in order to align them and to help them go to the right direction? And also what happens when you see that they are not in the right direction for 1, 2, 3 quarters?
I really hope that we don't get into a 1, 2, 3 quarters kind of situation.
It's too long.
Okay. Our GMs are kick-ass, the most talented people and the most senior people in the organization. So it's unlikely in our particular situation that I would be in like a mentorship, coaching type of position with these GMs.
Mm-hmm. They know
they
know.
work. They know.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be the first to say, I'm worried.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be the first to say,
Which is an amazing thing, that you can also trust your people that if there is a problem, they will stand and say it.
Yes, that's something that also I've experienced in the past, more in like big corporate environments.
Mm-hmm.
There was this one time at the BBC where I had 2 teams working in different locations, and they both experienced the same blocker.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them reported their project as green and the other reported their project as amber, which is a very British word. And I was like, why? But you bumped into the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some cultures where you think being green
Mm-hmm.
is what's going to get you the points with leadership. And I think that's a very bad place to be. I think that's things seeming good is probably one of the worst things you could do. It's one of the biggest sort of symptoms that you can see about politicization of organizations,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is cancer of organizations.
Definitely.
So in Lemonade specifically, it's unlikely that I'm going to be the one
Mm-hmm.
that's going to notice
Who reveal it.
Yes.
Yeah, they will stand up. Okay.
So it's usually they will stand up, and it's usually because either there's some sort of external factor that was unexpected or is playing out to be different than what was expected, or there is an internal factor that is turning out to be more complicated than expected. And then we have to ask ourselves, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so what do we do? Can we fix it? Would it be additional resources? Is it more important to fix it than some of the other things that we have to do?
Mm-hmm.
And then again, we go back to the sort of basic principles of what is that going to contribute to the business? What is our prioritization? Is there a separate business case to actually, change our financial plan and potentially add more cost in order to achieve this?
Mm-hmm.
But there'll be a sort of deep dive, and there'll be alternatives. And the right person. We have a decision-making framework as well, sort of who should make these types of decisions in different areas. So that's also very well known at Lemonade, and we're very good at empowering leaders to make decisions in their areas. You can make up to this, up to that. And it will be done based on what's going to be the impact and what's it going to cost us and what's your certainty. But specifically with us, and I think that's something that I would, like to replicate in any organization. I will die at Lemonade. I'm never leaving. But let's say one day, someday, this would be something that I'd do everything possible to replicate, because not being worried that something's being buried is an amazing luxury as a COO.
Everything is like out there. So what is the second methodology or metrics that you think as a COO that is very crucial and beneficial to implement within an organization?
So I was thinking about that, and when you said about the sort of people side of things, as you were asking your previous question, so I'm going to actually go and talk about something completely different, which is we do departmental people reviews. I think that's actually, I'm not sure if that's common. As a COO, I'm also the chief people officer at Lemonade. That was something that was very important to me when I actually got this job, because I don't understand the difference between operations and people. We're not running a factory floor where there's like machines. So if I need to make the organization more efficient, I need to do that with humans and a motivation. So I really do see the job to be 100% the same. So one of the tools that we look at is sort of what's happening with our people. And we've done, I think, a really good job at sort of building the data infrastructure for people as well. What's our attrition looking like? What's the satisfaction looking like? We have a tool called Office Vibe where we check out sort of how people are appreciating the company. What's our ENPS? What's the participation rate? Ambassadorship, relationship with manager. How are we doing in terms of compensation bands? Which departments are sort of giving too much, or maybe we need a refresh of the compensation bands. What are we doing with L&D? Are people participating in seminars? Is there a cross-reference between participation in seminars and attrition? So, I mentioned the companies, that's sort of a vertical view of Lemonade, but the departments are the horizontal departments. So if I'm the head of R&D, I'll have engineers in each of the companies, but I'm still line managing these individuals. I need to think about the careers, the development. So I would say another tool that we use quite religiously as well is sort of the health of our people, but from a very sort of scientific point of view.
I really liked it that you named it the health of our people. And I totally agree with this perception. It's not just operations, it's people who manage and act on these operations and how we need to take care of them. And tell me, when you have all these questionnaires or a platform that you've developed, how do your people feel to really tell the truth? Is it like privacy-wise or like how the manager is going to look at us? How, from your point of view, do you see it?
We encourage people to be direct and to be forthcoming. And in fact, we encourage them not to use the platforms. But if they do use the platforms, they're anonymous. So in that regard, you shouldn't fear. That's a dynamic, actually, that I think that we should, instead of trying to do more and more by way of convincing people that it's actually anonymous, we should do more and more by way of leading the organization in such a way that when you give feedback, good things happen and retaliation does not happen. It never happens. It's never happened. That's a myth. Why would you think that? We're encouraging people in large company forums to, instead of have like a Slido, in an all hands, we have that. But for example, I run a lot of internal communications forums. I would say that's my third tool, internal communications.
Okay.
And I speak to managers on a quarterly basis. I speak to directors and up on a quarterly basis. I speak to VPs and up on a bi-weekly basis. And it's a lot of communication. You have a question? Unmute yourself. What's your name? What's your perspective? Thank you so much for saying that. That was really courageous. I'm really happy you said that. And I think that that's kind of the type of that's the type of culture that we need to make sure is in place in order to, but yeah, they've got the platforms, they can speak anonymously. And we also act upon anonymous feedback, but it's much, much more difficult to do that as leadership when you don't know who the individual is, just in order to understand the context in which they're operating and how you can really surgically help them.
So I'm listening to you, both inspired and happy and smiling, and we had like a good vibe before. And I want maybe to switch a little bit the conversation to a little bit more personal aspect of you, of your journey. Like, what in your childhood, in your journey, in your experiences built you into this role that, of course, it didn't happen overnight and you developed into it, but to have this very holistic approach of both seeing the business acumen in a very, very accurate, focused, sharp way, and side by side to see the people behind it and to move operations, to move, like a very big ship. It's a big ship today, to move it in the right direction. And being a mom to 3 dragons, like everything together. So take us a little bit more into the personal aspect of Adina and how you paved your path.
I think I didn't have a choice. I was 12 years old when we left Australia and moved to Israel. I didn't speak a word of Hebrew. I read Hebrew because I could read the tefillah, I could read the prayers. I didn't know what they meant. And everything was perfect in Australia.
Why did you leave?
My parents are religious Zionist, and they thought that the country of Israel is the place that Jews are supposed to be.
Where from in Australia?
Melbourne.
All the way to the Holy Land.
All the way to the Jerusalem, the Holy City.
The Holy City.
And everything was great for me. I had the best boyfriend, and I was really good in swimming, and everything was working out for me there, and I was top of my class. And then I came here and didn't understand anything, and the children were mean. And there was physical abuse. There was the girls didn't want to speak to me, and it was really hard. And what are you going to do? You develop thick skin. You start to really, even without language, what are they trying to tell me? What is their body like? Is she angry with me now? Is she happy with me now? Is she going to be kind to me? And you start reading everything about people, their body language. And then, ultimately you start understanding the language, and you find a place for yourself and you win. You get to a position that you're, okay, I did this. I could probably do anything. In fact, I want to try lots of things and see if I can do them too. And then suddenly fear becomes something that's quite attractive.
And having your, it's not childhood, it's a little bit like further.
Adolescent.
Yeah. Coping with all of this. What did you learn about yourself that you want to embrace to the rest of your life?
I think I learned a couple things. I wanted my life to be like an adventure, and I wanted it to be fun. And those things are still true. If things aren't fun,
I can see it.
If things aren't fun, they shouldn't be. If you're unhappy, you should change. You should change your situation. That's true professionally, personally. Things need to be fun. And you should take that into the workplace as well. Things should be adventurous. Oh, does that feel like a bold suggestion? Oh, we've never done that before? Let's do it. Let's try that. And obviously we'll course correct, and failing is okay, but and having a playful environment and being in a situation where you like your teammates, you like hanging out after work. If those things aren't in place, then you're not going to thrive. I find that when people are happy, then other things don't bother them. And when people are unhappy, then suddenly, I should get like a raise in salary, and that will make me better. But it's not the salary.
It's not from inside. It doesn't come from inside.
Yeah, I think so. That's definitely a main part of my personality and what drives me as a leader. And I think what people would comment on if they described me as a leader as well.
That also takes a lot of courage to live that way, because sometimes you can tell yourself it's not accurate anymore, or I don't feel joyful or good enough or happy enough, and I need to change, and I need to make a change, and change has its trade-offs. So what helps you there to find the personal, the inner strength in order to cope with those things and to decide what is the right thing for you to do?
I have to say, honestly, I really do like change. But if I'm maybe trying to sort of dig a little deeper, one of the other things that really, really drives me is the sort of authenticity and being real. I mentioned that my parents were religious Zionists. So obviously I grew up in a religious family and I was, in a religious environment and myself, kept all of the religious ceremonies and rules until I was an odd 17, 18. And then sort of understanding that there's now a big chasm between my actions and how I'm conducting my life and where my mind's at intellectually. That sort of this lack of authenticity was something that I just couldn't deal with, and I had to come out and say, I don't believe in this stuff, and I'm going to intentionally, academically be secular. In fact, I'm going to double down so much on my Bible studies in an academic way that I'm going to go to a midrashah, which is like a yeshiva. Before the army, I went and studied Talmud for a whole year, and then I did a BA in Bible studies. And I'm going to know so much about this stuff so that I can continue to love it and to love the literature element of it and the historical element and the cultural element of it. But I don't believe in that, and I can't lead my life in a way that I don't believe in. And that's so deep inside me that this change element, if that clashes, then okay, so be it, because I cannot stand situations in which I cannot be authentic. So as a leader, I'm funny. Okay. So maybe COOs are typically buttoned up. Okay. I'm the COO and I'm not buttoned up. I get you don't look like a COO. What are you talking about? I look exactly like a COO. This is what COOs look like, at least for all the people that I've managed. And then they're going to grow up thinking that's what a COO looks like. So this sort of connection between who I am inside and what I portray, that has to sync with me.
It's so strong and it's so true. And I look at you when you're talking about it and I see the spark in the eye, and I'm really touched by this, because this authenticity, that it's not like we're two different personalities, right? The one that we're at work or the one that we are at home or the one that our parents expect us to be. We're the same one human being that has to be aligned in all the aspects as parents, as executive, as daughter of or brother or sister of. And how do we find our own inner voice, which is us? And there's no one right COO or one right investor or one right executive coach or one right founder. It all goes together to your values, to your vision, to who you are in this. What are your strengths? What is your authenticity, and how do you see yourself, and how you execute this in the world? Because at the end, if you live according to who you feel you are, the way you see you are, everything is much more coherentic and much more like coherent, like in a much better way. And then you feel that your life is more fulfilled, more accurate. And of course, it has a lot of trade-offs, and it takes a toll sometimes. And not everyone will be aligned with it. But I think I agree with you, like that this is our courage to find our path in life and the way that we see things through it. How was it to take Lemonade to an IPO? Part of the team that took Lemonade to IPO, how did it feel?
Great.
Don't be so short.
Oh, you want me to elaborate? I'll kindly do so. I was not COO at the time. I was still in the capacity as a chief of staff at the time, and my job was to manage the company while everything was happening. In fact, to sort of, obviously this is not, it's a very small circle of people actually know about the IPO until very, very close to it. So it's a combination of, letting the people that are actually meeting with the investors, doing the testing the waters, getting all the funds and, managing the work with the bankers and the regulators, and it, taking that all the way to the bell ringing. So of letting them do their work. So they're obviously very, very preoccupied. So you need to just, the company's still running, things are still happening. That was definitely a big part of my job at the time. But the second part was also establishing processes mainly on the people side that didn't exist, that would need to be in place when you become a public company. Suddenly you need to have like a hotline or these things that, we don't have that. And, so you kind of realize all these things that as a startup, that's okay. But when you become, an SEC regulated company, you're going to have all these things. So sort of identifying those gaps and implementing them and making sure that all happens smoothly. So that's sort of leading up to the IPO. I would say my job became much, much more difficult after that. Not because we're a company that sort of looks at the stock performance and has that lead our decisions internally. It does not at all. But much more because of the stock price is our employees' compensation. And when Lemonade went public, it popped. That was not the valuation that we thought was appropriate, and it just completely popped. And then suddenly, I think it at some point was about 10 times more what we went public with in terms of valuation, 10 times more, and nothing had happened besides sort of, people just sort of race buying. And then employees were sort of anchoring themselves over, oh, that's how much I'm worth today. And then sort of, where a lot of different growth stock crashed at that time and for the year after. And then there was, okay, so I don't think anything has changed. I know nothing has changed from a business performance standpoint. So we're going to keep doing what we need to do. We know what our path to profitability is. In fact, we just became cash flow positive in this earnings queue. So we kind of foresee this happening. We have a plan. We're going to stick to the plan. The business is healthy. Our unit economics are good. It's going to take time until the street kind of recovers with that and we sort of regain our investor base and the stock comes. So, but during this period of time, I need to maintain the motivations of the people. Some of that is very technical, you have options, they're underwater, what if we reissue, but dilution and sort of really thinking about the sort of tables of compensation. And that's a whole field of knowledge that I suddenly became an expert in and sort of knew superficially about, but now I feel like I can write a book about it. And the other thing is just sort of dealing with the turmoil of that and sort of just sticking to, we know we need to do this, we know we need to do that. Other companies coming in, private companies that can offer you this amount of stock. So that turned into the main challenge of being a public company, the sort of being in the public eye. And now the money is real. So how do I continue to motivate the people working for us?
And Adina, in the COO capacity, which is in all this turmoil and all those stuff. So what helps you to keep yourself in the right place, to hold everything together, to cope with all the challenges that as a CEO you have plenty of, like every day has many new challenges, and to hold yourself in this position, plus being a mother of 3 and managing everything as a mother and as a spouse, as your personal life. What helps you to navigate it all?
I love people. I really do. I'm really curious about people. Everybody interests me. And I love learning from them. And I love impacting them. I think in my lowest of lows, there'll always be something that I did in the week that maybe made somebody better because I spent some time with them or gave them feedback or empowered them or gave them positive reinforcement or some recognition or let them accompany me through a thinking process that they're going home and thinking, wow, that was a great interaction with Adina and now I'm feeling inspired or empowered or better at my job. And those things really get me going. I'm not saying that just to say that. It's a real thing.
I see it, I hear it, I relate to it. I know it's not just, from word and mouth. So like the people, that's what nurtures you to do it, like that helps you. Yeah.
And, specifically in this job, it's my first job that I have a sisterhood. At HSBC, I was 100% of the time the only female in the room. Except there was one more female that she was like the head of DI or something, and she was a terrible, terrible role model for women. Now the chief business officer, chief product officer, chief operating officer, head of data, GM of the homeowners company, GM of the pet company, GM of the car company. These are females and they're my age.
And comm.
And they're also mothers and comms. Of course.
Of course, how we can forget,
Favorite person at Lemonade.
And this is amazing to have this sisterhood and strengthen each other.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we never aspired to. We never set goals in this regard. I think that when you have more, you have more, and it's great. There's a huge support system, and it's fun. I mentioned fun is very important to me,
and it's good for the business.
I think it's good for the business that we're very well connected, professionally and personally, and it's just been a delightful experience.
That's amazing. Adina, so many knowledge and experiences and good vibes, and I can really feel, the joyfulness that you spoke about earlier. It's like it's fun, and it's fun to be around, and I think that even when we're executives and in high positions and influence other people, like to remember, to always remember, we're just human beings. We're all the same. To speak in the same level, to bring joy and good energy and good vibes into the room, it changes the whole atmosphere. To always remember where we're coming from, where we're going to, and like to help each other. And I think that you really embrace this and bring this attitude and approach, the way that you describe your position as a COO, and also that it gives a lot of inspiration to other young women who can also be mothers and can also be executives. And we can see at Lemonade so many role models for this. And it comes from within, right? To leverage your zone of genius, what you're good at, and to see how all the struggles also and challenges that you had as a child, as a young woman, how you embrace this, learn from it, grow from it, and bring it later on to business success. And you're really showing it, like in whatever you do. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
People who want to be in touch with Lemonade, to find a new job there, how they can address you, where can they find you?
They can go to our makers page and they can contact me on LinkedIn.
That's
always
amazing.
happy to chat.
Great. So thank you so much for joining me today. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.